Hi everyone, Alison Norton here. I've sent you an email with your testamentary trust will. It's a very long, detailed document, so the purpose of this video is to help explain it. We'll outline the general structure. We will explain the different roles of trustee and appointor, review the beneficiary classes, we'll explain how the bypass clause works, and we'll also discuss any optional testamentary trusts and where you can find some more information. So starting with the structure of the document, you'll see that it's divided into parts. Part A is the general part where the intentions are stated. So, for example, that previous wills are revoked and that this is your last will. This section also establishes the main structure of the testamentary trust. So in this case, this trust and your will has been prepared for the benefit of your surviving spouse. So you'll see that the nominated beneficiary is your spouse. In your particular will, though, it will state their full name. Your spouse is also the initial trustee and appointor. And then in this case, as an example, we have backup trustees being your children once they're of a certain age. And then we have a further fallback in the event that your children aren't old enough. We've got an example here of trustees and appointors from either side of the family. Moving on to Part B, this is where your executors are appointed. This is this Part 2.1 there. It's also where any guardians for minor children will be appointed. And then there is the gift of your personal belongings here. So this is, we discussed this during the meeting, your personal belongings are left to your executor to be distributed to the beneficiaries, in this case, your spouse or the children. You can also leave a list in your letter of wishes, but just a reminder that that's a wish. It's non-binding. It's up to your executor whether they follow your wishes. Moving on, I just wanted to explain the meaning of this gift over provision, because you will see this a little bit throughout the will for certain gifts. This is a bit of a catch-all. So if the original gift recipient has passed away before you, then any children that survived you of the original gift recipient will get that gift. So for example, if you'd left a gift to your child, but your child passed away before you, leaving their own children, then those children will inherit. This is a defined term, so you'll find that at the back of the will in the definitions section. Okay, so back to the testamentary directions, then you'll see this gift of your residual estate. So that means that after all of the debts have been paid, any specific gifts are made, everything that's left over is your residual estate. And in this case, you've left it all, this is the example, it's all been left to the testamentary trust for the benefit of your spouse. This is this 5.3 here, 5.1, provided that your spouse or any of your children or grandchildren have survived you. If you don't have a spouse or any children or grandchildren when you pass away, then the next clause will kick in, which we call the catastrophe clause. So by way of example, we've got here 50% for your spouse's siblings or 50% for your siblings with the gift over provision applying. And then there's another catch-all here. If either of those gifts have failed, then it gets added back in so that we don't have what we call an intestacy. Then 5.4 here, this is the bypass clause. So this gives your beneficiaries the ability to take the inheritance directly instead of putting it into a testamentary trust. And there'll be more about that in a minute. These additional testamentary trusts are set out in Part C, and this is basically to minimise tax. If there are any beneficiaries who can receive your super and claim the super tax-free because they're superannuation tax beneficiaries, then this additional superannuation proceeds trust can be established. And the same goes for these gifts to foreign beneficiaries. If for example, there was real estate and you wanted the real estate to go as is, it was not to be sold, then you need to have this foreign persons excluded testamentary trust. Otherwise, there'll be additional land tax and potentially capital gains tax to pay down the track. I've given you some flyers about that, so you can have a read of that. These are additional optional testamentary trusts that can be set up if needed after financial advice has been obtained. Moving on, Part D, this is the directions for your executors. So this is all the powers of the executors, how they're allowed to exercise their power. So we would say that this is like the hamburger with the lot. We include a lot of powers in here. Probably a lot of them will never be used, but it's much easier to have them and not need them rather than wish you could add something later. So by all means, have a read of that. But from the end of sort of part B onwards, it's not so important that you understand exactly how it works. I'm happy to explain anything, but this is sort of the legalese, and also in a minute we'll come to the trust deed, which is here in part E. So essentially, this is like a trust deed that sits inside your will. And this includes all of the terms for how the trust is to operate. So again, have a read of it. Happy to explain anything you need, but it's not really necessary that you understand exactly how every single term works. Part F is the interpretation. Again, this is how the will should be read. For example, you know, whether headings are included, singular means plural as well. Part G is the definitions section. Some of these definitions are quite important and you should have a read of them. For example, you want to have a look at the appointor definition to make sure that's correct. The same goes with the trustee definition. This is where we set out in a bit more detail how the succession of the trust should work. So that's there in the definitions section. And I just want to give you a reminder of this slide. So we would have gone over this during our initial meeting. Just a bit of a recap that all trusts work by separating the ownership of the asset from the people that can benefit from it. So the people that can benefit are the beneficiaries. There are different beneficiary classes and they are defined in the definitions section of your will. The beneficiaries can get the capital and income from the trust, but whether they get any money is at the complete discretion of the trustee. So this is a really important role, and it's really important that you understand the interplay between who the trustee is and who the beneficiaries are. What would happen if one of those trustees passed away and you were relying on the backup people? Because once that trustee is in control, they can do whatever they like with the money. They don't have to give it to people just because they're listed as a beneficiary. They've got full discretion about giving them money and capital from the trust. And then we also have this additional power that sits on top, which is the appointor power. And the appointor decides who the trustee is. So this allows the trustee to change over time, or there's also provision for trustees to be disqualified in certain circumstances to help protect the assets of the trust. So, for example, if your trustee was going through a marriage separation, they would be disqualified from being the trustee, and the next person in line would step up. And so that's to help protect the money from that family law event. There is a reminder here of the different categories of beneficiaries. So the nominated beneficiary in this case is your spouse. The primary beneficiaries include your spouse, plus your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And then secondary beneficiaries are defined in relation to yourself and also your primary beneficiaries. So it includes basically blood relatives, but it's your siblings, parents, grandparents, cousins, nephews, nieces, aunts, uncles. Okay, so just have that in your mind when we talk about these beneficiary classes here. So nominated beneficiary is your spouse in this instance. Again, primary beneficiaries and secondary beneficiaries. And I've highlighted this part here in yellow because, for example, if you had your children acting because your spouse has passed away or become ill, then have a think about whether you want to always make sure you've got two children acting, because feasibly, if, for example, you've appointed two of them, but one of them has either passed away or had an accident and they can't do the job anymore, then you've only got one sibling in charge of that trust. And in this case, that would be your child. But they've got complete discretion to just keep all of the money themselves and or distribute it to their own children. So just remember that, because it's very important about how you structure the trust. If you've got any concerns about this aspect, please let me know so we can discuss further. Now, a little bit more about the bypass clause. So you'll see here that I'll just go back a step. So I wanted to explain the powers of the primary beneficiaries. So the primary beneficiary has decision making along with the executor in relation to whether the whole testamentary trust should be bypassed completely and the beneficiaries take the gift directly. So they make that decision along with the executor. They've also got decision making about whether the superannuation proceeds trust and the foreign persons excluded testamentary trust should be set up. They are entitled to any undistributed income at the end of each accounting period. And the primary beneficiaries are also entitled to the undistributed capital when the trust ends, if there is any. Primary beneficiaries can also be granted a right to occupy any main residence that's held inside the trust. And they become the default successors if the trustee is disqualified and there isn't a nominated trustee to take over. So it's an important role because they have extra decision making and also extra entitlement to the money. And moving on. So this was my discussion about the bypass clause. So the executors and the primary beneficiaries, these can sometimes be the same people, but they might not be. Before they do anything in relation to the testamentary trust, they should get financial advice from a suitably qualified accountant or financial advisor about, for a start, whether to set up the trust in the first place. Or if they decide to set up the trust, what assets to put in it. They don't have to put all of the assets in it. They can keep some out. They've got real flexibility about it. So they want to get that financial advice because it's going to depend whether it's a good idea at the time based on when you pass away. The tax law might have changed. The beneficiaries will have personal circumstances. We don't know what your assets will be when you pass away. So they've got flexibility in the way that this document's drafted so that they can put all the money in, they can keep some out. They can also set up these extra trusts that we talked about, which is the super proceeds trust and the foreign person excluded trust. They also have the ability to establish a special disability trust. So if they had a disability, like they'd had a bad accident or something like that, they can use this particular type of trust, which I won't go into now, but there can be tax benefits and also can help them keep any disability pension that they might be getting. So the most appropriate structure really depends on where you're at the time and what the law says at the time. So very, very important to make sure that your beneficiaries get that advice before they decide what structure to use. So that's the main things you need to know. I want you to please also have a good read of that letter of advice and the flyers that I sent you, because there's a lot of information in there as well. If there's any parts highlighted in yellow, please provide me with your further instructions in relation to those so that I can finish your drafts. Please check the document to make sure that it accords with the instructions that you gave me and that it follows your wishes. Check that all the names are spelt correctly as well and we haven't missed anything or made a mistake. And then if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Okay, thank you.